I'm Marianne Gloe, coming to you from my screen porch in Decorah, Iowa. I have been part of Northeast Iowa Studio Tour since the very first time. I will miss having you in my home and in my studio in October, but I am so grateful to be part of this virtual tour. I remember about 50 some years ago, I was asked to do my first commission. It was the Holland Bluffs out at the Decorah Fish Hatchery. And at that time, I had had no previous instruction in watercolor painting or oil painting. I had taken some drawing classes, but that was about it. I painted it in oil, and it became my favorite subject for a long time. I did it later in watercolor. I even did it on a board with a wood burning tool. I did all seasons: summer, winter, snow on the ground, fall leaves all over the place. I had painted mostly in oil for a time, but I didn't really have any instruction in painting until I took a watercolor workshop in 1980. And it was offered by the Iowa Watercolor Society, and they offered a workshop every fall. I did not take them every fall, maybe every other or every third. And the best watercolor of the workshop of them all was the last one I took in 2007. And it was a watercolor workshop, an experimental watercolor workshop taught by Marianne Beckwith from Upper Michigan. And I learned so many things that I wasn't even able to imagine before I took the workshop. And as a result of it, I did this painting later, and I entered it in the Iowa Watercolor Society's state show, and a wonder of wonders, it won the top prize. It was thrilling at the time. It still thrills me to think about it. And later, I entered Iowa Watercolor Show a few other times, and a few years ago, I won a third place ribbon, which was just fine too. And I entered this year, and I sent the original of this, the framed original, down to Urbandale, and it will be judged with the others, and there will be no people present except the judge and maybe an assistant. And so that is kind of a virtual show too. So we'll see what happens with that one. This is called The Trail Above the Luther Barn. In recent years, an exciting commission by RC&D came to me, and via Laura Friest, and I was asked to paint state parks along the scenic byways of Northeast Iowa. A framed reproduction of each of the 7 parks is at the Iowa Law Library in Des Moines. They were hung there, and they were to hang during April, and of course the library got closed, and they happen to still be there because the library is not opened yet. But I have reproductions of all of those works that are available if you're interested. I have been intrigued by what I call my Cutwork watercolors. It's a form of watercolor collage, and it seems to be my go-to medium anymore. I love doing it. I'm not quite sure why. Maybe it's because I get to use up scraps. I don't know. But anyway, come with me to my studio, and I will show you what I have been working on. I'll show you my latest cut works and what paintings are in process. Okay. I think barn swallows are beautiful creatures, and I did this strip of barbed wire as cut work, and I will never do that again because it was extremely difficult to do. So I wouldn't advise anybody to do cut work barbed wire. The rhubarb, this is a barn board. I left these parts that were under the batten, and I think it makes you think that it was part of something larger. And the rhubarb I did in watercolor. I stuffed the stalk with a strip of foam core. And then I sealed the whole thing with a water-based sealer, and because it was water-based and this was watercolor, it picked up some of the color from the inside of the leaf, so I had to go back with acrylic paint to get all those images back again. Let me tell you about the tulips. I was going to enter the Iowa Artist Organization, and our regional show was scheduled for March 30th, and of course it was canceled. So we were told to send an image to Facebook of something reflecting springtime. And so I did the cut work tulips just on a gray sponged background. And after I spent April confined to the home and doing 3,000-piece puzzles, I decided that it would be interesting to add the outline of puzzle pieces to the background of the tulips. And the painting is called A Puzzling Spring. Let's go from Cutwork Tulips to Cutwork Wild Roses. And I am doing the cutwork now. I have painted it on watercolor paper in 2 parts, and I will either cut it out with scissors or with an X-Acto knife. And when I use the X-Acto knife, I put a piece of foam core underneath, and that's what I cut into. And I know that these images aren't the way I want them to be. I will be adding more detail to the leaves and to the flowers and to everything after I get them all cut out. And all of the edges, all of these edges that appear white are going to have to be colored to match the surface colors. Half of the thorn, the other half of the thorn, and now we'll see if I can get around that without cutting the thorn off. And I'm not sure that wild roses, that the thorns are alternating on the stem or that they're right across from each other. I was going to go online and look that up. Hallelujah. When you paint directly on watercolor paper, you are stuck with where you put them. But if you do the cut work, do all of the center of interest or whatever objects in cut work, you've got the freedom then to move them around on the page till you find a place where they suit you best. And that doesn't happen when you paint directly with watercolor. And as I get this glued on, if I want to cover up a bad junction, I can cut a leaf out and apply it right over top of it. And this is my final product. And I debated about having it be horizontal, and I decided I liked it vertical. And so I had note cards made of it, and I will somehow mat this and have it framed. I'm not sure quite how yet. Okay, Dug Road Trail. I started out by color blocking. I located my sky, my foliage, my rock formations, and then I let that dry. And now I added some darks to define the edges of the rocks, and I am working on putting some shadows in that are kind of mid-tone, not really dark. And let's see if I can locate them. It's just a method of locating where you want things, and there are a few lighters in that dark, and I will come in at some point with really whites. So I will just this is a long way to go, but the rocks had to be done before the foliage went on because much of the foliage is over the rocks. And at some point because I had never taken an oil painting class, I never knew that there was a product that you could add. It's a gel you can add to the oils, and it will speed the process of drying, and that has been so important to me in my future oil paintings because I have no patience with waiting for paint to dry. When I paint, I like to see the painting in reverse, and so I can never paint without a mirror. If I reverse it, I can immediately see my errors. I am definitely getting closer to completion, but I never am quite satisfied to quit. I want to differentiate this bunch of foliage from the rest of it because this is a little different shade of green. The rest of it is kind of a burnished green, and so I mixed up some phthalo green here, and I'm going to work that in to some of these places, just little dibs and dabs of it here and there, just to get this a slightly different color, because otherwise it gets really monotonous with the same shade of green all over. So I'm just dabbing in a little bit of that green, and if I have to go over it again and add the highlights, that's okay. This is pretty much dry paint I'm working on. And this is phthalo green, which is a strong green. The rest of it was a sap green that I use a lot of, and but it wasn't quite the right color for this part. And because I use this phthalo here, I've got to put it somewhere else, and I think that I will maybe just add little touches of it here and there, especially down here maybe. Some of these greens I'm just going to adjust a little. It's just an adjustment process. And then I've got some brighter greens here, probably should have, that I will highlight with, and maybe just, oh, I don't know if that's showing up. That's not the right brush. It's a little bit too bulky. I'll show you the brush I like to use. This poor little brush. It used to have a nice square little set of bristles, and I have absolutely scrubbed it off. Do you want to hear about that? Okay, now what am I doing? Oh, and then, okay, that's a great little brush for adding little highlighted areas. And it's not that my hands are shaking, it's just the motion I like to use when I'm doing foliage. And I've been doing a lot of foliage. And I no longer look at the original picture, I'm just playing it by ear. And this is a little clumsy looking there, so we will perfect it, hopefully. This space maybe needs a little embellishing. We have to keep it from getting monotonous. There, I think that improves it. This needs lightening here too. And I always have to anchor one little finger. And I end up with paint all over that finger because things aren't always as dry as I'd like them. Okay, maybe right here we need a little embellishing. And then something else I want to do yet. I want to darken some of the areas in the foliage just to make the bright seem a little brighter. If I just darken a little behind them, then it brings that color out a little better. And if I think it's a little too rough, then I do a little finger painting. Let's see, where else could we? This space needs a little attention. Try to just bring out those areas a little bit by darkening behind it. And up here, this is rather boring, so we will, but not too much. And see, the nice thing about this is I'm working on dry paint. And so it's not going to pick up the color that's under it like it would. That's how that brush got such a fine little point on it. And I wouldn't trade it for a brand new one for anything. Let's see, I don't know. This is what made this work so hard, because there was no separation of the foliage. There was no way to say this tree ends here, this tree begins here, because they all just are kind of blending together. And every once in a while I check it with my little mirror to make sure that I'm not making things worse. I promise I'll quit making my little adjustments and have the work all finished by the time studio tour gets here. I'll quit messing with it. I've had instructors at various times say to me as they watched me do all this adjusting, quit already. Thank you for tuning in, or should I say clicking on. I hope next year that you can be here in person, because I just love having you visit my home and studio. Thank you.